Hi, Bob.
I am on my phone, so I'm struggling a little bit right now. So I'll get there.
No worries, you're good.
I do have one member of the public in the waiting room. Just let me know when you'd like me to admit him.
I don't want to drop off. Could you please let them in?
Yes,
Erica?
I will.
Thank you.
All right, John Rogers.
Hi, John. Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay, this meeting of the Reading Municipal Light Department Board of Commissioners is being held remotely on Zoom and streamed live on the RCTV and YouTube. The RMLD Board of Commissioners recognize the importance of hearing public comment at the discretion of the chair on items of the official agenda. We ask that all questions or comments from the public be directed to the chair, and that all parties, including members of the RMLD board, act in a professional and courteous manner when addressing the board or responding to comments. Once recognized by the chair, all persons addressing the board shall state their name and address prior to speaking. It is the role of the chair to maintain order in all public comment or ensuring discussion. Commissioner Pacino will be the board secretary. And
Very good.
all right. And I believe we have John Rogers from the public and Karen Herrick. Hello. All righty. Public comment. I'm going to defer to ladies first, if that's okay, John. Okay, Karen, if you'd like to go.
Sure, thank you. And then I might not stay all the way to the end. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I've just wanted to come tonight. It's been a while since I've visited. I am continuing as your liaison to the select board this year. Very happy and excited to do that. So I wanted to start by saying that I got an electric vehicle earlier this month, and I was blown away by how seamless the process was, and getting an email from RMLD saying, hey, we know what you're up to and you might want to apply for this rebate. And it's very easy, and that was wonderful. And I needed that list of instructions to save me a call. So that was all good. And now I'm not allowed to do laundry between 12 and 7. Thank you very much. It's all good. And, thank you. Colleen's been keeping us posted about the EV charger grant. That's just amazing. And we're so looking forward to those being installed, and hopefully very soon. And also the other thing that happened earlier, I think it was July, right after the 4th, is that the RMLD and representatives from Reading did testify at the hearing by the Telecommunications Committee. So, thank you, Colleen, for coming forward and coming up with proposals to, facilitate RMLD communities joining green communities and testifying live. We were fortunate, the hearing was only 2 hours. So myself, David Zeke from the Climate Advisory Committee were able to testify live. A number of other communities did, asking them to amend the regulations. And select member Mark Doxer also sent in written comments. So we did our part. And then I wanted to let you know that we had an update with town staff. David Zeke and I did with town manager and planning staff and assistant town manager. So we've been working really hard at our Green Communities application, and they recently changed the regulations. There's no longer a once per year joining opportunity. It is now a rolling basis. So anyway, I just wanted to give you guys kind of the first heads up that from where we're standing, Reading should be ready to submit an application in October, which was kind of the old time that you would submit an application anyway. We have some public sessions we want to do, but we have approved the EV policy, and so is the school board, school committee, and we also previously adopted the stretch code. Town meeting overwhelmingly did that. So I just wanted to give you that heads up, and we want to work with you. So we wanted to just to keep you all updated for your support. And we also had kind of the very beginnings of a conversation about should Reading be thinking about getting a sustainability director, which of course, RMLD would be is a big part of our sustainability goals in meeting the objectives of the climate bill. So that's what we've been working on our end. And I appreciate that my power hasn't gone out at all during these storms. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Karen. That was very kind words.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question back to Ms. Eric? Or
Yes, absolutely. Please say.
Just a couple of quick things. What is it? First, just what is it that you need from us, or what would be needed from us to make that application go smoothly? And also, I'm just curious, as we go through some really record heat waves especially in other parts of the country, like record-breaking, incredible super heat waves. As we go into them here, we have a great peak shredding program at RMLD. It's gotten a lot better over the years, and it's a real credit to the department. And I'm wondering what the town itself, what policy or procedure the town government itself has for reacting to when those warnings come in, especially the annual ones, in the summer. Is there a procedure in the town for the town to reduce its own consumption? That's just something. Do you know anything about that?
That's an excellent question. I actually am not aware of a policy addressing that, but I would be happy to ask that question. I'm not even sure which department head would kind of work on that, but I'm happy to do that.
Great, thanks. It's all to the good, it helps us on our costs and it helps in emissions, and it's a great program we have.
Right. And then your other question, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't believe that we need RMLD for any input for the application. If and when Reading is approved, and Colleen knows all about this, we would need some help getting up and going, and namely, I believe, and limited to collecting about 50 cents per account and forwarding that to the Renewable Trust, which supports the Green Communities program. So, and all the more reason to keep everybody in the loop so we can figure out how to do that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions?
If I hear anything else, I will let you know. Nothing else came up at our meeting last week.
Okay. At this point, if I could invite John to speak.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Rogers, 39 Tower Hill Road, North Reading, and here also on behalf of GRACE, the Greater Reading Alliance for Clean Energy. And basically just, this is going to get boring, but just wanted to compliment you again, as I think I did in the last meeting I attended. I'm looking forward to Greg's presentation of the Renewable Choice Program, and he's got 3 adjectives on his slide. I don't want to steal your thunder, Greg, but I think you hit it. You nailed it, and I think that's terrific. Keeping it simple. And I think it really does that. I'm less sure about the non-carbon choice. I'm not sure that adds a whole lot of value, and I think it's going to add complexity for you all. But the renewable choice, the way you've spelled it out, and I look forward to that discussion later tonight. My one recommendation is, and specifying Class 1 was terrific. Class 1 renewable energy credits. I think that's really important. may want to define it even more simply for folks and say some subset of that, because we know some is more controversial than others. So, maybe it's solar and wind, or solar, wind, and low impact hydro, because I know you have good connections with hydro developers, or hydro, not developers, but old stuff, but potentially stuff that has a class 1 component to it. So just a suggestion that even simpler, even more motivating, might further the goals even more. But again, great job on that, and thank you.
Well, thank you, John. All right. If we could please move to item number 2, report on the Citizens Advisory Board meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Bill,
I
please.
attended virtually the Citizen Advisory Board. First, I want to make a comment kind of under public comment. If anybody doesn't believe that there's climate change going on, Dave mentioned that the temperatures out in the West and also the floods in Europe. I suggest people go look at that and see the effect climate change has had. So that's just a general comment I want to make here tonight. So, and with that, I'll go to the Citizen Advisory Board. I attended the meeting earlier tonight. You're going to see all the same presentations again, so I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, at this point. So I will leave it to both Colleen and to Greg to make their presentations, and because that's basically what was presented at the CAB tonight.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next item, which would be approval of the board minutes, attachment 1, suggested motion. Phil, if you could.
Yeah, I can make the motion. Move that the Board of Commissioners approve the meeting minutes of February 24th, 2021 meeting on the recommendation of the general manager.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Ms. Pacino, aye.
Mr. Stempak, aye.
Talbot, aye.
Ms. Coulter, aye.
Beta, I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you, Alina. Okay. So therefore 4-0, it's approved.
401.
All right.
401.
4-0-1. Thank you, Phil. Okay, the next item on the agenda, item 5, the general manager's report, attachment number 2. Colleen, if you could, please.
Yeah, can I make a suggestion though? If Karen is only here, I don't know how long she's going to stay. I think it might be beneficial if Greg went first, and I can do some updates afterwards and policy 19 afterwards. I think this is really important. Phil, what do you? I mean, that would be my recommendation. I'll do whatever you want.
Sure, I think that's a great recommendation.
Yeah.
Although I don't think you have to vote. Is anybody any concerns with that?
No.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right, sure. That's a great suggestion. Why don't we go ahead with that if you're ready?
Thank you.
Perfect. So Erica, if you could do the IRD slides, get them ready. While she gets those ready, I'll move through it pretty quickly. There's 4 key topics. One is just a load snapshot. There'll be 2 key points that I'll bring forward on the load snapshot. It sets the stage for the rest of the discussion. Quick discussion on power supply, which we'll do on a regular basis. The quarterly report on the certificates. I'll report on that quickly, and then we'll spend a little bit more time talking about rates and choices and cost of service. That last piece is to set the stage for a follow-up meeting or for the next meeting, which would be hopefully in August. And also, I think for tonight, the key thing we're looking for is some feedback from you guys on choices. I think John Rogers got us started on that. And we can talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. So this, in the load, 2 key things I want to, 2 key takeaways. One is just a reminder of the 3 primary rate classes. The 4th rate class is basically school, municipality, buildings, et cetera. It's that small little circle in the middle there. I'm going to come back to this chart in just a second. But the 3 primary rate classes are residential, which is the largest piece, about 40% of the total load measured in kWh. And then there's industrial and commercial, which are almost equal, not quite. Obviously, you can see from the data, industrial is a little bit bigger. Some of the key things that I'll show you on this chart in just a moment is that the residential, besides being the largest, it's also got the broadest geography, obviously by definition. The other two thing is it's the most seasonally dynamic, and it's also the most hourly dynamic. We'll see the seasonality here on this chart to the right. Hourly would be something I could do at a later date, but basically it's a little bit more dynamic than the C&I space. That chart to the right is basically a line chart in a circle. It's known as a spider chart. And or think of it as a clock, basically. January being on the top in the 12 o'clock position, and then July being in the 6 o'clock position. So it's basically each month. And then those lines are basically the load from those respective classes during each month. And so there's a lot of interest. We could spend a lot of time digging through this, but the key thing I want you to notice is the relative consistency of the greens and orange yellow ones, which are the C&I space, the yellowish oranges being the commercial, and the greenish ones being the industrial. You can see on a seasonal basis, they stay pretty constant, which is going to be important when we talk about rate discussion later on tonight and also in more detail next time. You'll notice that the blues, which are the residential, there's a bit more seasonality, as I just mentioned a few moments ago, in the wintertime, January, February, and also in August. So that's the one key takeaway, is just that characterization of those three rate classes. And that's going to be important for us to remember. We'll come back to this data next month, just as a quick refresher and background. The other key takeaway from this slide is the growth. And you can see from this slide, the different colors. So there's 2019, 2020, 2021 for each one of these. And a key takeaway from each one of these is that for each class, the load is starting to grow. That's in contrast to the past decade, where the load in aggregate was declining at a rate of about 1% per year. So over the past 10 years, each year down 1%. We basically come to the bottom of that curve. And the reason we've come to the bottom of that curve, probably the biggest change, is that the efficiency gains have slowed down. An example would be the LED light replacement program. That most of that replacements happened, not all of it, but a good chunk of it. And lighting used to be nearly 30% of a typical building's load, and now it's less than 10%. So that's an example of where efficiency gains are slowing. There's just the beginning of electrification. And then there's a little bit of business growth that we anticipate. We're seeing a little bit of it here in this data the past 3 years, but those three things are changing the load. So the second key takeaway is that we're starting a period of load growth. Right now, we're trying to conservatively estimate it to be just a little bit less than 1% per year annually. 0.8 is our estimate right now. We will continue to refine that each year. The reason why this is important from a context perspective, because it sets the stage for our discussing on rates, which we'll talk about at the end. But load growth is a good thing for all rate payers, and that it basically, you're going to see upward pressure on rates for a whole bunch of reasons we'll talk about in a few minutes. But load growth basically allows that upward pressure to be dampened a little bit. So it's not going to be quite as pressured up with load growth. So that's a good thing. The second thing, and John's here representing Hamid from the E&O group, but as load starts to grow, we're going to transition to a period of equipment build out from the network perspective, not just maintenance. So that's another change that we anticipate over the next 5 to 10 years as well. So key points, just the characterization of those three classes is important, and the fact we've gone from a decline to a slightly growing load growth. Next slide, please. This is important from the supply side. If you guys remember, I didn't bring it into this presentation. I want to keep it short and sweet. But if you remember our multi-year slide that we usually, the stacked bar chart, as we go to the upper right-hand corner, we've got to fill in, each year we've got to basically continue to purchase power to fill in contracts that are expiring. And so we're doing that now, not only in just purely expiring contracts, but now we have to start accommodating growth. So what we have done so far this year, we've executed 3 TFA contracts, and what always comes up, what does TFA stand for? It's Transaction Facility Agreement. But basically what it is, it's an analysis that we run regularly, a couple times a month. And we basically look at both price, there's an algorithm tied to this. We look at both future prices and also volumes. So we basically look to fill in parts of our portfolio. So we've done 3 different contracts, January, March, and May. We're running the analysis to look at another one. Prices are actually going up, which is important context for later on. Our portfolio for 2021 is pretty full right now. We have a little bit of variability, which is good. But basically we ended up buying in the TFA program about 19%. And we go out basically 4 years when we do these. So I'll report on these on a quarterly basis. And that's a good mechanism to help balance and take advantage of pricing opportunities as we need them. The second group there in the middle are the 3, just a quick update on the 3 hydro projects that we presented earlier this spring. There was 2 in New York, with the first one being Dahoa, I'm sorry. And the second one was also in upstate New York. The third one is probably going to get signed in November of 2021. That's actually the very first one you guys approved and voted on. That's the one in Connecticut. They're in the process of transferring the license and doing the acquisition on that one. We're on the verge of signing the Dahoa one. Back in early June, we reported that we had finished the due diligence, the environmental and social justice due diligence. So that report we completed. So we're in the process of finalizing the contract for the Dahoa one. And then we'll do the second hydro, which is the upstate New York one. We'll start we've actually already started the due diligence process on that one as well, and trying to finalize that contract. So those are in process. Thank you for approving those earlier. For the reasons that we talked about before in terms of load growth, I'll walk a little bit more in context here in just a minute. Well, I should mention it right now. One of the things to keep in mind in terms of load growth and climate bill is that the climate bill has basically, through the electrification requirements, it will in effect increase load for everybody in New England. Right now, Massachusetts is the most aggressive, but Massachusetts is a significant portion of the regional growth. And at the same time, the climate bill is removing from the supply portfolio fossil fuel-based supplies as well, which includes natural gas. And so what we're in a situation as we look forward, and all of us, whether it's an IOU, a small MLP, or a large MLP, we're all looking at the scenario where demand is increasing and the known supply is decreasing. So there's increasing competition. Everybody's looking for supply, in addition, looking for non-carbon supply. So the fact that we're pushing aggressively on these non-carbon and the hydro ones is very important. So thank you guys for your support. On that last block, we are continuing to search. We're actively looking for utility scale solar opportunities. We're actually in the rate discussion. We will make some proposals in terms of updating the residential solar incentives within our network. We view both of those as being very important. As offshore wind starts to materialize, you've seen a lot of news, but they need to get to a point where we can actually enter contracts. We'll do that in combination with a group of other MLPs likely through E&E, unless we can do some stuff on our own, but we'll do that. That's in the works as well. So as much offshore wind as we can get our hands on. The other thing that we continue to look at, you guys are all aware that we have a storage project. We have a battery project in place right now. It is financially beneficial to us. It is part of our peak management program that Commissioner Talbot mentioned earlier. So we are looking actively in terms of where we can add storage. Realize that storage is not a generator, even though it's in power supply. The reason why we put it in this block here is it allows us to shift. So for example, when we get solar adding to supply in the afternoon, we will maybe shift it to the evening. So storage is a key piece, and we're looking for opportunities there as well to expand on what we've already got in place. Those are the 3 key things to think about power supply. I'm moving fairly quickly because I want to make sure we have time. We got a lot on the agenda. Next slide, please. The commitment that we made from Policy 30, that we're revision 1 that we put in place earlier this year, is that on a quarterly basis that we would report in terms of what we're doing with our certificates. We had laid a policy in place in terms of what we would be doing. This is our quarterly snapshot. So these certificates are from Q1 of 2021, so the first 3 months of this year. As you remember, there's roughly a 6-month delay in terms of them getting minted. These certificates were minted last week, July 15th. So we are in the process of transacting those. So if you look at the waterfall slide here on the left, Our opening balance, because it starts at the beginning of the year, we had sold everything last year as part of the old policy. So we started with an opening balance of 0 each quarter. That'll now have some numbers in it. We acquired roughly 60,000 certificates. That represents approximately 43% of our portfolio. In terms of our total power purchase portfolio, which we actually purchased during that first quarter. As you remember, our self-imposed part of the Policy 30 Rev 1, we as a RMLD, as an organization, went under your guidance, but the new policy basically calls for us each year doing an annual increase in terms of the amount of certificates that we retire. So in 2020, the climate bill requirement was 20%, and in 2030, the requirement is 50%. So that basically means each year we'll increase the number of certificates, the level of certificates that we require each year by 3%. In this particular period, we're going to retire all the effects plus a few of the other categories. The others basically are either non-effect or non-mass class ones. And in that, so that we're going to retire that group to get to that 23%. So we always each quarter try and be at our 23% target for this year. Obviously next year it'll be 26%, and the year after 3% on top of that. In terms of the balance, the policy instructs us to basically sell the balance, and what the policy or what the operating procedure that we're working on right now is of that 23%, we're going to sell as soon as we can, approximately 80% of those certificates, is 80% of that above the 20%, above the 23%. So that balance there between 23 and 43, we're going to sell roughly 80% of that, or roughly about 16% of the portfolio. That's going to net a little bit over likely a little bit over $400,000 for this quarter that will apply. And we're going to do this to this quarter, this calendar quarter, and we'll continue to do that each quarter so that we have basically stable retirement coming in, and we don't leave that till the very end in one big bucket. The balance, that 20% balance, we're going to basically leave in our NEPOOL GIS account. And we can obviously transact those, either retire or sell at any point in time. And we're just doing that because, if you remember, we have seasonality in our load, and we're trying to make sure that on a quarterly basis, on a seasonal basis, we hit the 23%. So that's a quick snapshot of where we are in certificates. We'll continue to report on this on a regular basis, probably a format pretty similar to this, combination of a waterfall chart and an idea of the order of magnitude. Next slide, please. So this sets the stage for cost of service. I know I'm moving quickly. There's a lot of material here, but we're trying to set the stage here for a deeper discussion. And in 2 slides, I'm going to ask is where we're going to want your opinion on the renewable choice and the non-carbon choice. But this kind of sets the stage. If you remember from the June presentation, early June presentation, we did an illustration of 2025 expenses. And we looked at it between operating cost, energy capacity, transmission, and certificates. So kind of where we're going. And the important element is to notice the relative importance of capacity and transmission, the things that we're doing to manage those. Again, Commissioner Talbot mentioned our peak management program. That's one of the things we do to keep those costs down. There's a lot of details in terms of how we do that. Obviously, on the energy piece, that's that 30%. It goes into how we contract, what we contract, and the length of our contracts, et cetera. As I mentioned before, there is upward pressure on demand or load due to electrification primarily, which is all part of the climate bill, specifically the drive of transportation, electrification of transportation, as well as electrification of buildings. So all that's driving it up. As I mentioned earlier, the typical supplies are being phased out from a climate bill perspective. So we continue to look for opportunities in power supply, which is why there's upward pressure on that energy piece. But in terms of the rates and what you're going to see in more detail, we wanted to walk through those key goals. There's the umbrella of making sure that they're understandable. These are rates we're talking about now. They're fair and they're motivating. And they're motivating for people to think about changing their behavior in terms of how they use energy. The goals, just the 5 key things that we're always looking at, and this will be important context for our discussion next time. Obviously, we need to design the rates so they cover the cost of providing service, both the energy piece, the energy transmission capacity certificates, the power piece, as well as the operating cost. It's important that we allocate those costs fairly across the rate base. We need to provide funds for efficiency and electrification. Our goal is to provide more data and more options to allow customers to modify their behavior, to be motivated to do things differently. Again, in terms of looking at their total load and their total use, and then obviously their total cost. And obviously, we've always been required to comply with the DPU requirements, but also now climate bill requirements. We talked about those before. So those are some of the things that we need to make sure we accommodate from a goal perspective. There's a lot of key inputs, but in the 5 key inputs that we look at, again, it's just to set the stage, the actual expenses and the forecasted expenses. At the same time, the planned capital cost, again, distinguishing between expenses and capital cost. Looking at coincident demand relative to energy capacity and transmission in particular, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then, of course, we've got special provisions and also what the profile in particular looks like by the individual rate class. And we talked a little bit about that in the very first slide. There's a seasonality play, and there's also a daily play. And one of the things that we'll show you next time is that commercial and industrial in particular tend to be fairly, industrial in particular tends to be fairly flat over a 24-hour period, with businesses typically running 3 shifts, whereas residential has a pretty steep curve. And so we need to accommodate that when we think about our rates as well. Next slide, please. One of the things that's happening that is going to impact how we think about fairly allocating cost across the rate classes is basically when the peak is shifting. And in this left-hand column, this is just an example, an illustration to give you an idea of what's happening. This is a 2017 example. It was a simple slide that came from ISO New England. So this is in our rate base, or this is on a regional basis. But this is basically a 24-hour curve, all right? And for the springtime, which is a shoulder month, that curve, you can see that gray line, basically it's peaking, around lunchtime. But in that curve, that baseline curve, it's on a cloudy day, so there's no impact of solar. 2 days later, it's a sunny day and solar, and this is 2017 now. There's a lot more solar installed now than there was then. But basically, the key point is that dip at 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon is the result of solar picking up a significant part of the load. That load, let's assume that gray line is still there, but when you add solar into it, it basically reduces the net load in the middle of the afternoon. In effect, it's basically pushing the peaks to a different hour of the day. In this particular case, we've got 2 peaks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. But in the summertime, it's generally just 1 peak late in the afternoon. That centered column there, that blue ISO New England capacity, just to give some data behind it, that middle column is the hour ending. So hour ending 1500, 2008, 9, 10. And as you get to 19, 20, 20 at the bottom of that curve, that's hour ending 1800, which is 6 o'clock versus hour ending 1500 at the top, which is about a decade ago. It was basically the middle of the afternoon. So part of that change is driven by increased solar, which is not so much pushing the load down. Well, it's basically taking part of the load in the middle of the afternoon, which in effect, what used to be a lower part of the curve is now a peak. That's going to become important when we think about capacity and transmission in particular, because capacity and transmission, remember, represent about 40% of the cost. So we're gonna think, remember, in the context of fairly allocating cost, this is one of the factors that we're going to put into play. So we'll talk about it a little bit next time, but I wanted to give you guys an idea. When we talk about the peak shift, this is what's behind it. Next slide, please. All right, so this is an illustration. It's a residential illustration. It's preliminary. It's not an announcement, but I just wanted to give you guys somewhat of a reference and an idea of where things are and where we might be going. So the last rate increase was back in July of 2018. It was a little bit more than 1%. In our current rate structure, we haven't done a rate increase since then. Some of the planned capital expenses and capital projects are already in the current rates. During 2021, right, the total cost of service just in 2021 is partially paid from the rate stabilization. So the rates that were done back in 2018 carried the cost through in 2019 and 2020, but during this year, we've taken a portion of the rate stabilization to fill that increase in the cost of service. We are going to be looking at, and we'll talk about this in the August meeting, that we may end up using some of the rate stabilization funds to do some stuff in 2022 potentially, but we'll have a more formal recommendation. The key element here is that things have been pretty stable for the past several years. But remember, our load growth is starting to change, and we've kind of exhausted the rates from the past. So we're due for a rate discussion, which is what we're trying to get done. And it's part of our the general manager's goals for the year, which means it's part of our goals for the year as well. In that chart in the bottom, I just want to basically give you a general sense. The key background, again, using residential as an example, is about 820 kWh, so kilowatt hours that a typical, I say typical, average residential home in the service territory consumes, which equates to roughly about $120, $121, just rough average. If we look at those four cost of service factors, there's the operating expense, which is that lower portion. And if we think that that increases roughly at about 3% per year, which is a reasonable assumption right now, that basically would net out to be a little bit more than point. So 13 mils, I guess is a better way to say it. But it worked out to be roughly $1 per bill each month. If you take the electrification and energy conservation fund, we currently collect 1/10 of 1 cent, which is extremely low by all comparisons. And we're underfunding our incentive programs right now. What our recommendation most likely will be, and we talked about this in the past, it probably will be 1/2 cent. So there might be 4/10 of a cent increase, which would equate to an average typical bill of about $3.28. Again, rough numbers, it's just an illustration. Power supply, which is a pass through, but just to give you an idea of power supply, there's upward pressure on rates. That would equate to be roughly about $1, almost $2, $1.71 per month. And then certificate requirement is again small right now, but that's going to increase as we go up toward the 50% target by 2030. So the next couple of years, that would be roughly 74, 75 cents per month. All said and done, you add those key blocks together, it's about $6. Is roughly the kind of the order of magnitude of what a typical bill would go up to cover the programs and costs that we have in place right now. And that, again, illustratively, that's about a 5% increase. So just trying to give you guys some categories and order of magnitude and what's coming down the road. I just wanted to put at the bottom here, we have two suggestions, a renewable choice and a non-carbon choice. In a moment, I'm going to ask for some feedback on those two. And we'll have these numbers appear in those next slides, but just to kind of give you an order of magnitude, out of that $121 bill, that would be roughly $25 for the renewable choice. We'll explain that in a little more detail. And the non-carbon would be about $6. So that's roughly 21% and 5% respectively. So just illustration to kind of give you an idea of what's coming down the road for the August rate discussion meeting, and it'll be just on rates. Next slide. So just this is what John Rogers was referring to, I think earlier. Simple, effective, and motivating is what we're trying to think about this renewable choice. This renewable choice, or choices, we should say, and that's what we're proposing. We're looking for feedback tonight so we can take that feedback so that when we come back in August, we have something that reflects some of the desires that you guys have and the feedback you have. As we talked about before, we looked at the renewable programs, the certificate retirement renewable programs that the other utilities had, Belmont, Wellesley, Shrewsbury, Middleborough, Taunton. Wellesley, this particular one is the voluntary renewable energy program. We did talk in some previous sessions about the project-oriented one, which is a project-focused one. So I'm just trying to do apples to apples here. And at the bottom, you can see the two proposals that we'll start talking about here in just a moment in green. You get an idea of the relative additional cost. That's pretty similar to what other people are doing. The other programs are opt-in. On the left-hand side, these are the factors that we were looking at in terms of thinking about the programs, and I'll walk you through the details here in just a second. But the goal is to look at how do we communicate the programs, customer preferences, opt-in, opt-out, which will be an important feedback from you guys. Certificate count and pricing, the certificate values. So the number of certificates change by season as though the pricing. So we want to make sure that we can actually administer the program and also keep them, again, so simple, effective, and motivating. Okay, next slide. So on this slide, just to keep things in mind, the goal is to offer customers 100% option, right? So this is in addition to the 23% that all ratepayers pay right now. And the reason why all ratepayers pay 23 or contribute 23% is we're retiring the first 23% this year. Next year it'll be 26%. The next year it'll be 3% higher. But for 2021, everybody participates, all ratepayers participate in the 23%. The question is, or the opportunity is, for the additional 77% for this year, as an example, what would it look like? So we created, as we talked about before, two choices, a renewable choice and a non-carbon choice. And as John Rogers mentioned earlier, on the renewable choice, we focused exclusively on mass class 1 certificates. I've got a note here that we might want to make it even further refined, which was a great suggestion. But it isn't, the intention of that one is to kind of mimic to some degree the IOU, RPS, CES discussions that we had earlier. Right now, and the prices do change over time, and we monitor them, run them every week, and it's part of our portfolio management now. But currently, Massachusetts class 1 certificates are trading roughly around $40. Right now, they're around $39 to $40.25. So somewhere in that range. The idea, so that we can manage the program and have some stability, is make it a 1-year commitment. And again, if we look at that 77% times the 820 kWh times the 4 cents, it works out to be roughly $25 or about 20% of a typical bill. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is non-carbon choice, which kind of, as we've talked about before, non-carbon is kind of the new metric based on the climate bill. And that particular scenario would be oriented toward retiring. And again, both of these are to take those funds and retire certificates like we talked about last month. And those would be above and beyond the 23%. But to basically retire regional class 2, tier 1 certificates, those kind of certificates that aren't mass class 1 and not effects typically. In our portfolio, the average for those is about $11 and change in the current portfolio. So that works out to be $11 per certificate value on average. So that works out to be about a cent per kilowatt hour. Again, the same basic structure. We do a 1-year commitment on opt-in. If we run the math on that, that works out to be roughly $6 a month, which is roughly 5% of a typical monthly budget. So I'm going to pause now for a minute. And any kind of questions, but also feedback on renewable versus non-carbon choice.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Yes, Phil.
Okay, let me ask my question now. One of the great things is watching the CAB, I get the preview of all this. So a couple of questions I got here. Is it possible that, you say 8 certificates per person per year? Could a person buy more than one?
So the way we thought about it was to bring them up to 100%. Could we allow them to buy more? Maybe I hadn't thought about that, to be honest. So they can buy more than 100%.
Solar too, which I subscribe.
Oh yeah.
I only bought one. I wish I bought more than one.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, that program has worked, and I'm wondering, if somebody wanted to come in, could they buy? Could they buy two?
Yeah. To answer that question, yeah, we're looking at the in addition to the solar choice programs. So we haven't finalized how to allow those, and if it allows it to go over 100%. That's a different question that we are digesting. I thought you're asking if somebody wants to buy 110% just cash, could we do that? Which is another interesting question.
No, I mean, instead of just buying one unit, you buy actually two, is what I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah.
In terms of that number. I know you mentioned in the CAB that, it'd be up actually to whatever the certificates are, and then if it was beyond that, it would just, you buy on the open market to retire them. You want to address that too?
Yeah, sure. So the question that came up earlier, let's either you do an opt-out program or you have an opt-in program that more people subscribe to it. And our intention is basically to retire certificates that we have on hand. And if it becomes wildly popular and we need 60% of our portfolio to have certificates to retire, So we would basically, above our 43%, we would have to go out to the open market and actually buy those additional certificates and then retire them. So that's one of the things we are thinking about in terms of how we would administer under that scenario. But right now, we're basically looking at, with these funds from either renewable choice or the non-carbon choice, and we'll keep track of the two, but to retire the additional certificates above the 23% line for this year. And obviously next year, it'd be above the 26% line and onward and onward. So
Can you address why you've chosen opt-in as opposed to and not opt-out?
So this is what we're proposing. We basically looked at what the other MLPs were doing, and we wanted to basically allow this. We're looking for feedback in terms of opt-in versus opt-out. Part of the discussion on opt-in versus opt-out is the magnitude of the change. Obviously, in a renewable one where you're doing all mass class ones, it's a rather significant increase, about 20%. We'll need to do a tremendous amount of communication if that's in fact what you ask us to do an opt-out program. An opt-out program under the non-carbon, where it's a 5% increase, might not be so controversial from a customer perspective. So we had this discussion 2 sessions ago, and there was some, again, there were some calls that we got afterwards asking, what are we doing? And we said, it's open for discussion. If you have an opinion, you should come to our meetings, these meetings. So we're open to input from the commissioners in terms of how they want us to think about this. I want to give you an idea of order of magnitude.
Yeah, last, can you go back one slide, please? Can you go back one slide here? I noticed that we seem to have a great difference between, similar between Taunton versus Reading. What are they doing differently than what we'd be doing in terms of the cost per kilowatt? Yeah, so it's the type of certificates that they are retiring, and if they're funding them 100%. So my understanding right now is they're not funding them 100%. We would basically say whatever funds would 100% pay for those certificates. So I think there's some cross subsidization going on with Taunton. I will confirm that, but that's my understanding. Okay, very good.
What we tried to do is, a mass class 1 certificate is $40 a megawatt hour. You convert that into kilowatt hours, it's 4 cents. So we just might try to make it a direct 1-to-1. That's what we were thinking of.
Okay, I'll let others speak.
Greg, can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you know the participation rates of the other towns listed here?
No, but I will get that for our August discussion. That's a great question, and I had that on the list and had not accomplished that yet, so I will get that.
Excuse me, Greg, one question. When you have renewable choice and non-carbon choice, what was the thought to market one versus the other? Would you say, hey, look, if you're a solar customer and you have an EV vehicle, you're renewable. If you don't have either of those items, and you want to contribute to the non-carbon footprint, you're more likely to take non-carbon choice. How were you thinking of marketing, 1, 2 versus the void is do nothing, and what happens? Obviously, that's opt-in versus opt-out. But what's the marketing changes?
So the thought process right now, we didn't spend as much time focused on the renewable one because we knew the people. So the working assumption is those that would be focused on what a mass class 1 would be deep into thinking about what a mass class 1 was. The thought process of the non-carbon would be people that want to participate in some way, didn't really want to get into the details, but wanted to do something, and would basically say, hey, look, for another $6 or 5%, heck, I'll contribute to climate. I mean, however they want to characterize it. So we haven't gone into the details of how we want to package it, but we thought that the non-carbon would probably get a significantly higher rate of participation if we did an opt-in program, and we would encourage that because it's not a huge financial number. The working assumption is that a lot of the rate base are interested and want to do something on climate, but want to check a box. So we've got more work to do, but the focus is more on trying to create something that would get adoption, and that's where non-carbon came in. And then the other piece, most people know about non-carbon. That's got a lot of, non-carbon is the new buzzword replacing renewable.
And was there any thought towards, okay, if you do add a EV charger or solar to your home, you'll get forced into a program, you're forced into renewable choice?
No, we haven't thought about that yet, actually.
Okay.
Well, so there is a time of use requirement for EV chargers, for example, if you want to be in that program, and we will in the August one, we will be proposing a more specific rate for EV charging in terms of the time of EV charging. We believe now, based on the analysis we've done, that there is an opportunity to actually encourage adoption with rates, whereas before we ran the analysis, we were a little bit suspect. So we actually think that rates could be a driver. Again, a lot of communication to be done, won't happen overnight, but rates will drive people's economic analysis. Say, hey, if I'm doing a replacement of a vehicle, or maybe I'm doing a new one, there's the environmental motivation, but there'd be a strong economic motivation as well. We'll talk more about that next week, but that would be, we haven't tied the two together, but we know that, well, we're going to propose an aggressive EV related time of use.
Greg,
Yeah.
this Wellesley line, number 2, the voluntary renewable energy program, 24, is that an older program they have?
That's the one that's been in existence.
Okay.
And it was an opt-in. The new one potentially is going to replace this one, but this was literally, they put this in similar to what we were thinking about as well.
Right. And I know the new one, is definitely an opt-out. And like, I don't know, a few weeks ago, it was out of 10,000 customers, about 80 had opted out.
Oh, nice. That's the data so far. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people complain.
No,
so, go ahead.
he didn't say it was complaints. He just said they just opted out. Is that what you meant?
I should direct things to the chair, but
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's good information to know, but I mean, we don't have a program yet, right? We'll find out if theirs is brand new. Let's get their data and figure it out. Like, I mean, some people might not even know it's even occurred. I know what.
No, they've been talking about it for a year, so they definitely have been broadcasting it to all their ratepayers.
It came into effect in July, so it's hitting their bills now. You're right. I'll get more participation feedback.
If I may offer my feedback on all this, Greg,
Please.
It's all a great effort at the highest level. Given that you already face, like you said, you're gonna face communications challenges with this. I think having 2 programs, one with 2 different names, is making your job harder for yourself without really a benefit. And I don't, just looking at the numbers, it's not clear to me why would the renewable one add $21 on average? Why would it have to add that much while the other one only adds $5? That you could have different levels of participation within a renewable choice. So there could be, you can do it at whatever the tranches are, $5, 10, 20, like Shrewsbury did. Why does it have to be just that large number, which $21 feels like a lot, so that would be my suggestion, would be to do one program, have it start with, you can always add another one. Right?
Yeah. Erica, would you go down one slide? So just to clarify, so maybe have them have the same name, a renewable choice, but still have two or three subcategories underneath it, something like that.
Correct, because like you have one way to do it, and you have to go in at this level where it's adding, what is it, $25? Like that's the fixed amount it's adding to everybody's bill. It's only one way to participate. I think that's perhaps too rigid and too high of a number, and that it would be good to give people levels of participation within that. similar to what Shrewsbury did. And my inclination would be to start with the renewable choice one. And if you need to, then roll into a second program. But I just think you need one name, one program, just keep it simple for yourself and everybody else.
So I'll in effect have a couple, 2 or 3 different categories from less expensive to more expensive. We can figure out how to present them underneath a renewable choice category. Am I following? I think I'm following.
Yeah. And that's right. And we might need to go through this 1 or 2 meeting cycles, right? To kind of look at this. I mean, it's a very tough problem you're grappling with. So
I think it's very relevant in the context of the rate study that we'll be presenting next time. So we'll take the feedback and tune this up a bit based on the feedback. You're right, it'll probably take a couple iterations. We have to offer something and we want to give some choices, but how do we make it easy? So
yeah, and one last just quick numerical question is, when you say all ratepayers contribute 23%, is that a reference to what our current non-carbon power supply number is? So if anybody were asked what is RMLD's power supply and non-carbon, the answer today is 23%, correct?
for 2021, right? Because what means basically we're retiring 23% of our certificates, non-carbon certificates in this year. And that's the policy that you guys laid out for, yeah. So that, and then 3% next year, and it's going to 50% by 2030.
Understood. So under the climate law, which is now in force, our levels are now 23%. That's the number we're at.
Yeah, and an important point, right? From a compliance perspective, we don't have to hit any, we're going to report each year, we're required to do that, but our target doesn't come into play until 2030. And so
I get that. Yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of there's a climate law, it defines how we can talk about this now, which it didn't used to. And when you follow what the climate law says, and anybody asks you, hey, Greg, what's RMLD's non-carbon power supply? It's 23%.
Correct. In 2021.
Okay. It wasn't higher than that before. It would have been lower than that before, but we have a law now that says how you can talk about it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, so just kind of tacking on to what Dave said, which I think is an excellent idea, to have one program. You know, I'd like to see maybe the renewable choice be one program. And if really you could get that fixed rate down to a, where it matches the rate on the non-carbon, I think I'd actually support maybe an opt-out on this, if you can get that number down there. Because I think that's, a 4% kilowatt, I'd hate to try to do that as a opt-out. Even though the statistics may indicate differently, which we're going to look into. But if you get that to a 1 cent, per kilowatt hour, I mean, I think definitely to move it to an opt-out I'd be in favor of that. So my 2 cents, or my 1 cent doubled.
That's interesting. Opt-out on, go ahead.
I think John, yeah, sure. I can't see everybody, so
No, that's
yeah, I was gonna say,
okay.
John.
That's okay. I want to, Greg, great work on this. I really think it's fantastic. And I do agree that if we could sort of blend the two programs together and make it much more easily understandable by our general public in the first place, our customers. And I think that'd be a really good thing to do. And at some point in the future, if we need to divert the two and go into different classes, we probably could. So maybe taking baby steps first is a good idea. I have to tell you, I'm very much against an opt-out program, 100% actually, because I don't think it helps people who don't understand the complexity, and I think it really takes advantage of people and to force them into programs and then have to get out, as opposed to the general public who really wants to have this, and they can opt into it so easily. So I just want to state my position that I'm really not in favor of an opt-out program. I think it's absolutely wrong. And I think opt-in is a great way for people to participate who want to participate. So it's just my feeling. I just wanted to state that.
Marlena, do you want to say anything?
Just until Greg gets the numbers on the opt-in programs, the percentages of the participation rates. I don't see how one could choose opt-in without knowing that.
Well, just a comment. The data that Marlena sent around in one of our previous meetings showed that obviously opt out was a higher participation rate. There's no question about it, because most of the people didn't understand what they were getting into at the time. And so I would suggest that that's not an appropriate way for us to act as a municipal entity.
If I might add on to what John's saying, and I'm all for an opt-in, but I do think that's a great idea about having one program name with 2 tiers in it, or possibly 3. So, all right, maybe we can just close this discussion and move on. I know it's in the sake of time, we get a couple more big items on the agenda. So, is that agreeable to everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Greg. That was fantastic. Okay, if we went on to previously item number 5, the general manager's report. Colleen, please.
Thank you. Nice job, Greg. So on the annual report, it's ready for release. It contains 3 previously approved elements, including the high school art contest for the cover. Thanks to everyone for voting. The 2020 highlights in the GM letter submitted under the GM evaluation in March of 2021, and the audited financial statements. The report will be uploaded to the website and distributed to the towns tomorrow. A recap of the 2020 highlights and the 2021 year-to-date progress will be made at the Reading Town meeting this fall. I usually make it in April, but we'll be doing November this year. This has changed because we moved to a calendar year budget, and there's a suggested motion for the approval as presented.
Ready for the motion, Mr. Chair?
Can we discuss anything in the report first, or should we do it during the motion?
What do you want? What do you want, Bob? You want the motion discussion, or what do you want?
I said let's do the motion and then
Okay,
and
we
then
have
have discussion.
Okay. Move that the Board of Commissioners approve the annual report for calendar year 2020 as presented in the recommendation of the General Manager.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if any others do, but I guess I was wondering, we just discussed what the non-carbon numbers are, and up in one of the highlights, it says our non-carbon numbers are 25%. And I think they're really 23, but then more significantly on page 17, there's a full page graphic that represents that we are at 40% non-carbon in 2021, which is what the year we're in now. And it says 32% last year, but we just heard that we are now at 23%. That's been the number that's been set at a number of meetings. So I don't understand the graphic on page 17. It just seems to be giving very large numbers that are above what we actually have for non-carbon power supply.
Do you want to chime in, Greg? This is a snapshot in 2020. Everybody knows that, right? This is a 2020 before the climate bill. So when I tried to do this page, it was talking about what was coming down the pike, but it's technically in 2020. So this would have been similar to what we presented at the end of the end of 2020.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is that this is total certificates purchased, a portion which were sold and a portion which were retired. So we didn't, for 2020, we didn't segregate them, as you mentioned earlier. Now we're in a different, the metric now is retirement versus sales. And we didn't segregate those in this particular report. That's where the difference is currently. That's in terms of this graphic.
I guess I understand, right, but it doesn't quite sit right, because we do have the law in effect now, and the report's coming out, now. And this is a chart in the report saying what our power supply is, and it's saying we're at 40% non-carbon in 2021. So, you know, I do think this page should be replaced with one that follows what the climate law says we're allowed to say with respect to our power supply.
Good. May I make a comment?
Yes, please, John.
So Dave, you're right, but 2021 is not over. Annual reports typically are the previous year, meaning they reflect what the 2020 is, not what 2021 is, or what 2021 will be, or even if we're halfway through 2021. This is a reflection, all annual reports are a reflection of the past. So if this is what it was in the past, then 2021's annual report will reflect the correct numbers that you're asking for.
So I take your point there, and you're quite right that annual reports are retroactive and retrospective. Still in all, I mean, even as it's, I think we have a little bit of a different situation in that how we're allowed to talk about these numbers is now governed by a law that just passed. And, you know, even if you're right, 2021 is not over, but 2020, it says we were at 30% and we weren't. So because we have a law that says how we're allowed to talk about our power supply. So we can't say in a report coming out now that we had 30% in 2020, we didn't. So
Can I make a suggestion? How about this? This is actually a snapshot of 2020. It's last year's. We did move to a calendar year. If we upload this to the website, we can put an updated page that says current year to date. But we can't really take out what happened in 2020. This is why at the bottom under climate bill, I was very careful to write pending and not make it into 2021. It has to reflect last year. But we can put another page and send it along to the people who are looking at the website and to the people that we send this out to.
I mean, without
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to speak at this point.
I think that that's a very reasonable thing to do, to say this is a reflection of 2020 and here's where we are so far in 2021. I think that should help dispel whatever issues there are.
Yeah. Yes, John, please go ahead. Rogers.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate this conversation. I actually think in 2020, I mean, you all know what I brought to you about renewable energy credits. Any of that, so that what's the easy thing to do would be take that solar wedge, take that wind wedge, and if we retired any of the RECs for those for 2020, then we own the right to put solar in and wind in our pie chart. If we didn't retire them, if we sold them all, then those at the very least need to be, hatched out or something. What we really ended up with was system power. So I think this was a very real issue for 2020, with or without the climate bill. And the climate bill didn't change. All it did was make sure that MLPs were paying attention. It didn't change the nature of RECs. RECs still are the rights to have it on the pie chart. If we wanted it in the pie chart, we would have had to retire those RECs. So at the very least, there needs to be I would suggest there have to be some, asterisks or hatching or a note under the renewable resources blurb below it that just said RMLD sold the RECs for these or whatever. Because I think it's pretty clear from what Greg said that we didn't hold on to any solar or wind RECs. So we didn't have solar or wind.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, please.
So two things. One is I think we can make that fine tune if need be. One of the things they were trying to get across with this graphic is the concept of associated RECs. When we buy power, we work diligently to, I won't take a purist view, but we really try and buy power where we can buy the certificates with it. Obviously, we want to get the power first, non-carbon second, and then certificates third in terms of thinking about it. In this particular case, 2020, the only ones we ended up selling were solar, some solar and some wind. And so in reality, if we were to adjust this, the ones that we actually retired would probably be higher. I got to go back and run the numbers, but they'd be higher than they would be for 2021 because we're making a conscious effort now to sell up to the annualized line. We can run it, but it's going to be pretty close to this. and we can make some clarification if need be. But we still want to make sure that the audience understands, A, what we retired versus sell, good point. But B is the emphasis in terms of really buying power from renewable or non-carbon resources. Those are two different points we're trying to get across. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And that's why I think it maybe goes to a separate attachment with the new page. What was your thought there?
I think what I might do is just take this chart and make some just make some reference to what 2020 was. We tried to put in that climate bill, as Colleen mentioned, we tried to give some description in the climate bill down there at the bottom, but we can make another note there. We won't change the numbers. And then we'll go back and look at the 40% Commissioner Talbot elsewhere in the book. I forgot about that piece, but I can clean this one up just a little bit without making a major change to get the point across, is my suggestion.
So after listening to all this, just a quick feedback, if I may. This chart has a line saying what RMLD's target based on climate bill requirements is, going up to 50%. And it implies that we're kind of already there by 2022. We are 2022, 2023. We're already like well over 50%. I've heard all this, but I still have to say, I find this really very misleading as to where we are, and that this chart should not appear right now because we have the law. And this chart talks about the climate bill, and actually it's a climate law now. It's not just the bill. And there's other language elsewhere in this annual report that refers to pending legislation, but it's not pending legislation. I know this is a report from the past, but I just can't vote for this annual report. I don't, based on this chart being in here with the law that we had come in. Anybody who wants to know what RMLD's situation is going to look at this, and we're putting it out there as our statement of where we are, and it's just.
If I may, it's not just a statement of, thank you, Bob. It's not just a statement of where we are. It's a statement of where we're trying to get to. It's a projections into the future. The law wasn't passed until end of last year. And so again, annual reports reflect the past. You have to take that into account, and they project where you expect to be into the future with extenuating circumstances. Every annual report of every company in the United States does exactly the same thing. So all they're trying to do is communicate to the public about where they are, where they hope to be. And if there's modifying situations, which by the way, there always are, Dave, you're absolutely right. You have to read the little notes, the little fine little notes to kind of find out what's changing or what's not changing. So I have no problem with the chart whatsoever. And next year, the chart's going to be different, hopefully. And we'll incorporate the law as it's stated to change the chart if we need to. But this is the past. We're looking backwards. I mean, I can't believe that there's a major issue with where we're trying to go. It is forward looking too.
Can't be both looking and that's from November, but okay, we disagree, and this is our annual report stating where we are, and this is summarizing our power supply, and it isn't even accurate for 2020. We didn't have 30% non-carbon in 2020. So
okay, so at this point, I think that I'm a little, until we see the revised chart, I think we should table any vote or any motion at this point till we see it again. But that delays it a month.
I think that's a good idea, Bob. I mean, and I think if you're going to give it a month, why not have a little bit more explanation of, hey, there's a climate bill, climate law, and this is what our power supply looks like under the climate law, and have a second figure, because so much has changed. I mean, in decades, we haven't had this kind of regulatory legal change.
Well, and again, I 100% agree with John. We go by, well, at the end of 2020, we can't change the rules as you go, right? It's 2020, end of 2020, go forward from there. But until we can get an adjusted chart, I don't think we should vote on anything.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Phil.
I will move that we table the motion until the August meeting, at which point the the concerns that have been raised by Commissioner Talbot can be addressed and represented to us back at the August meeting.
Is there a second?
Somebody's got to second it.
I'll second that.
Okay. Have a vote.
Mr. Pacino, aye?
Talbot, aye.
Ms. Coulter, aye.
Nay.
Beta, I.
Okay, votes 4-1. We'll table it till the next meeting. Okay, let's go to,
Before we move forward, can I ask for clarification of exactly what it is? Am I able to add asterisks with notes on it to further clarify? I thought I was doing that at the bottom with the climate bill, but do you want, I can make an additional page and have the breakout of 2020, and then on the next page, I can put a line on this table saying, okay, going forward is the climate bill, and on the next page, call it a projection and put in a new graph. Is that acceptable? Just want to make sure I'm clear before we spend time fixing this.
If you're me, I would say do a chart like this, but that complies with what the law says we now can say with respect to our power supply. So you could leave this one with some notes on it, but then have a second full page saying what does it look like with the law in force and using the definitions of the law.
Okay.
That's what I would do, but that's just me.
yeah, I think we just got to be very focused on, we can agree to disagree about a million things. If I say we go two pages, right? And then page 1 and then page 2 with additional information. So that way it all could be on there. You get two views. And I hope we can agree on that once, and maybe if we can circulate that during the course of the month. So when it comes up on the agenda, we can just approve it and move on. If there's any, we can take the comments. We can send that out, and then during the course of the month.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes, please,
agree. I
John.
think that's a good idea.
Okay. Mr. Rogers, I saw your hand up very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's even simpler, and I know that a lot of work has gone into the production of this. I think just simple modifications to this chart, just hatchings that said, look, we had solar, we sold off these RECs, this is what's left. We had wind, we sold off these RECs, this is what's left, and just a little asterisk. I don't think you need to get into the climate law. I think it's just this chart. What I think you want to do is set Greg up for success in 2021, because if we had 40% in 2020 and then 23% in 21, people are going to have right-thinking folks are going to have your head. Sorry, Greg, but I think, but it's not. I mean, the point is, we sold a bunch of RECs in 2020. We're focusing on 2021 and 23%, and then the years following. So I think you just want to set 2021 up with success by making 2020, and it's not the climate law. It's what RECs are. RECs are the right to claim it. If we don't have the RECs, we can't claim it. We shouldn't claim it. Thank you.
And the law says we can't claim it now. It didn't used to say that, but it does.
It was there. The law codified that. It was already there. Certainly, the Attorney General would say,
okay, guys,
it was already there.
Great. We're going round and round. Okay, let's move on. So I think we got 2 great ideas. All right. Good luck, Greg. Put something together. All right. Let's move on to review of policy 19.
Actually, we still have a couple of things left on the update. The Board of Commissioners quarterly scheduled review. Can go through these fairly quickly. At the end of our last meeting, I recommended a schedule for the agenda and include monthly, quarterly, and rotating presentations. This helps to ensure that all the items in policy 19 are covered, policy 30 bids, evaluations, financials, division updates, etc. Erica has created this guideline for the agenda to assist both the chair and the staff in preparing for these monthly meetings and presentations that we put together. This was also presented to CAB for their meetings, because a lot of they don't carry everything that's on the board meeting, but they do carry some. And our goals are to ensure policy compliance, quality presentations are afforded proper opportunity for discussion, consideration for new information requests, and efficiency of time. So Erica's just going to show you what we've put together here for, this is a guideline. So we work with the chair and say, okay, this is what we've got up for January. And if you want to switch things around, we can. Things that are not, so what will be rotated is E&O, the IRD retail side will be done quarterly, and Wendy's quarterly financials. That does not mean that in the board packet down the bottom that we won't include as part of not discuss the AP payroll questions and finances every month. So you can see down the bottom, the colors change. So what is in green is of the ones that can be rotated will be done every month.
Okay.
Do you want to go to you can go to the second tab. So this is what we'll be using to say what we're covering every month. And then we have what actually happened is the last tab. And this is what we'll be using. So I think that will keep each of the divisions on a rotation basis for the information. Power supply, though, under wholesale, under policy 30 will be done every month. That's not one that's going to be rotated, along with bids and other things that we have to do at every month. So any questions on that? Okay. The Mass EVIP grant update. I copied everybody on the changes that I submitted to the state. So we did receive a contract back. We have 30 days to get back on that. The RMLD is teamed up with Voltrek to assist us with the engineering and construction. The locations are now the Wilmington Library and Town Hall, Reading at Haven and Maine, the train depot, and the Reading Library. At the library, if you noticed in my email, we still need final confirmation of the feasibility for the direct drilling between Deering Street up through the retaining wall to the above ground parking. Chuck Underhill will be the project coordinator, and John McDonough is going to be the lead RMLD engineering and construction supervisor. George Hooper is assigned for Wilmington, and Ryan Percival for Reading are the town representatives. We're very excited about this. Joyce will work on a very general press release for this week. We won't be confirming the library in Reading, but we'll discuss that that's something we're trying to nail down. And we're very excited about this. Any questions on the Mass EVIP grant? When I went and talked to the town of Wilmington, these groups that are put together, they're going to stay intact so that they can look at other areas where electric vehicle charging stations can go in. And then we'll have Voltrek and our engineering teams go in and start assessing them as the board approves budgets, because we do have one dual in the budget right now for this year for each of the 4 towns. We'll continue with that as we build it out. But we'll be looking at areas going forward. Trying to define exactly where these things are going to go for the grants was challenging. But when you're working with the towns, trying to figure out the next place to put one, there's a lot of input from towns. So I will be asking you probably in the future for the one that is in front of Christopher's, the Haven Street and Main Street, that we consider, or you consider a recommendation for me for adopting that island once we get the charging station in with the pad mount and everything, and we clear that area, similar to how we take care of the land at the end of the street. That would be a below the line suggestion. But I'm not doing that now, but I'm just letting you know that I'll probably make that recommendation. Any questions on that? Karen talked briefly about the green communities. I did submit testimony and an update to an amendment to the bill. What we're really looking for here, what would be the best thing to happen is if we were allowed to join based on one IOU meter that's in Wilmington and all 4 were able to join. That would take us away from having to work as a billing center for the Renewable Trust. But at the end of the day, even if they don't decide to do that, at least each of the 4 towns will be able to progress at their own pace as they work to adopt green communities criteria. So as soon as I hear something back from the legislation, I will let you know. And then just some quick updates. We just attended the Wilmington Farmers Market. We're holding these events and talking about all the things that the survey said about our programs to make sure we get more information out there. We held electrification webinar June 7th in partnership with the libraries for 4 towns. It's actually on the website, and it was on RCTV and the 4 TV stations for each of the towns. Upcoming events, Reading Library Vehicle Day. I just sent you out a press release on that. The Reading Fall Street Fair and the North Reading Town Day. We'll be there talking about all of our programs. We have Public Power Week open house coming up on October 7th with a rain date of the 14th. It's a pretty interesting concept. I did mention to the cab, we might be looking at some remote control cars, like plug-in electric cars that the kids can do. Maybe build some little poles and they can drive them around it. This thing where we lift kids up and put them in the bucket for bucket truck rides we might not be there yet with just coming out of a pandemic. Putting on the rubber gloves, the kids try to put the bolt onto the, so things like that. There's too much touching. So we're trying to come up with some things that will really get the kids there, because that's who brings the families in. And it's really the parents that take a look at all of our programs and technical layouts. So we are working on that. So far, so good with the Board of Health on being able to run that. The electric car show, August 15th, between 10 and 1 at the Wilmington Farmers Market. We sent something out on that. There'll be a combination of dealers there and private owners. And then there's a heat pump workshop that I mentioned at the last meeting. We're still trying to get that date in the fall for workshop number 2. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen. It's all about the trucks, by the way, with the kids. Just FYI. It's all about the trucks. It's all about the trucks.
I know. It's
you know. I got to get in the truck. I got to touch the truck. Touch a truck. Right. But okay.
You might be able to let them climb on them, but you know, lifting up in the bucket, even if you use the telecommunications ones that's got the door on it, you'd be able to open the door from the inside. So we don't want any. We don't want anybody getting hurt. So if anybody comes up with a good idea, though, we do have Tech Tip Awards. Let me know if you think of something that would. I think the remote control cars are going to be great. So we'll start there. Good with that, we can jump into policy 19. I know we've gone through this one for several meetings.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if we just want to ask if there's any comments and do it that way.
I think that is proper.
I do have some, but whenever.
I have some too.
Okay.
You go
So,
first? Want me to go first, Mr. Chair?
yes, please, Phil.
Okay. I got one item in, it's in section 4, where it says board positions and duties. This has now made me illegal. Well, you got the vice chair cannot be the secretary. So you just made me illegal here. Even though I feel good.
So you want the vice chair to be able to be the secretary?
Yes. So I suggest.
Okay, and then on item B, under the board secretary and the chair, if the vice chair is not present,
yeah, I mean, the secretary step up. I mean, in the old days, sound like I'm ancient, which I am. We only had two offices. We had a chair and a secretary. That was it. When I first got on the board, that's all we had. Just two. We added a vice chair at some point, but I have no problem with the secretary, or you can even say the ranking member, I guess, the most senior member, if they want to step up, if both the chair and the secretary are not available. You could state that it could be the most senior member at that point as a pro tem.
But wouldn't you have a problem with quorum then, though, Phil?
Well, no, if two people are absent, there's still three people there. That would make a quorum.
Yeah, okay,
All right. If three of us are not there, then we don't have a quorum.
right.
Okay. The other one in that section too is, and it's one that I've always advocated, is, I've always thought a maximum of 2-year term. Something I've advocated over the years for many times. I always felt that, you get 1-year term, you get your feet under you, and then after a year, you're gone. So I've always kind of advocated for some sort of 2-year term, a maximum of 2-year term in terms of that. I mean, it doesn't have to be, where it says maximum, it doesn't have to be 2 years. We can always change it every year. But I always kind of thought, to have a 2-year term as a maximum there. Again, this
Can I
was
make a
kind of-
comment on that, Phil, while we're there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Or Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, John. Open discussion.
Yeah, I think that I really like the 1 year. I mean, I think that a lot of things happen in 1 year that are either viewed as good or viewed as bad or controversial or non-controversial, especially having gone through it this last year. So I think that having a 1-year term is a very beneficial type of thing. It gives new blood, it brings different people in, and it rotates people. And I think it's a wonderful thing to have the rotation of different individuals with different focuses. So that's just my opinion.
Okay.
With the 3-year term, a 2-year position and a 3-year term, you might never get a chance to do anything, right? So with the year rotation, there's a little bit more of a opportunity.
I tend to agree with what John just said.
That's fine. I just bring the topic up, it's my personal feeling. I'm not offended.
No. I mean, and if I don't, what's to say if someone didn't, the board voted you in, Phil, right, or voted somebody in for a second. Does that eliminate that?
What do you mean? Explain that.
Like, so let's just say someone wanted to repeat the chair, and everybody was okay. Are we forcing a rotation with this, or?
I think we are. I think we are.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so
Next.
so how are we leaving this one? Just the way it is?
Yes, the way it is.
Okay.
Just leave it.
So leave the terms. Am I making any edits to here? A secretary who is not the chair or vice chair?
Yes, we're removing the word vice chair. The secretary who is not the chair.
Got it. And then if the chair is unable to attend here?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would do that. Well, no, you can leave that in, actually. Well, if we're both not there. I guess you got to take that out too.
Okay. Term.
Well, let's do this. If the chair is not present, the vice chair would then step up.
Mhm.
Right.
And you need to add in the words after that. Should both of them not be there, then the secretary would step up at that point, because I'm not always going to be the secretary.
And then the,
Okay, but you are the secretary now, so if you're not
Right,
there
so-
and you're the vice chair, do you want it to say that the most senior person? What do you
Yeah,
want
the
to?
most senior person in that case.
Senior is defined as length on the board or what?
Yes. Term on the board.
Not our real age.
Speak for yourself.
Okay.
Ready? I have a couple questions on this.
Go ahead, John. Dave, please.
Thank you, Bob. So, by the way, I don't think we have gone through this section by section. It was on, but we didn't actually go through it. I think there's new language about very severe language about like email, which is good. Right up top, the second set of edits there.
What section are you on?
It's in section 3. Now, obviously we have the law we have to follow. I don't know that we have to spell out what the law says in this, because other than saying we have to follow state law, which of course we do. This language seems to say I can't even, or none of us can even email, hey, everybody, here's a document to the group. I thought we could at least do that. Like, here's a document. Perhaps we can talk about this at the next meeting, that we could do that. But this language seems to say we can't even do that. I know we can't say an opinion on it or whatever, but that we, like we had a conversation which was sensible a few minutes ago. Hey, let's send around a possible new figure so we can look at it before the meeting, save time. But can we even do that? So,
Well, I think it's because it's discussing, it's a continuation of what is considered a deliberation. So if you want me to clarify that, the point of putting that in is I get a lot of questions from commissioners since I've been here in 8 years, not understanding that the general manager is not, open meeting law does not apply to me. It applies to the public body. And so the second part was to clarify that, and the first part was to try to clarify sending out the emails and deliberation. But it really goes back to the previous sentence where it says the board, no quorum of the board may engage in any deliberation or otherwise. And then the next sentence, this restriction includes serial communications. And then it clarifies what the serial communications.
yeah, okay. I mean, we can leave it. It seemed to me like it wasn't necessary because we have a state law. And if anybody wants to know, hey, look at the state law. There's Secretary of State has a whole.
Well, there's a lot of state laws that are in our policies, which is why we're spending so much time going through them and updating them to meet the laws. And I think what we're trying to do is pull out the pieces of the law so that they're here and they're easily accessible.
Okay, it's fine. It just seemed like we could just say you have to follow state law.
If I may, I agree with Dave. I think it's very instructional if we've got articles that we want to share with people.
Yeah.
But we typically in the past have put on not for deliberation, in the email. Basically, it's just informational purposes or educational purposes only. And whether that's from the Wall Street Journal or it's from whatever educational thing,
right?
We're just going to share them with each other. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I think it's absolutely a great thing that we share things with each other, as opposed to having to bring them up just in a meeting where no one has any time to even look at them.
Agreed.
This doesn't prevent that. I think, again, I think this is nothing more than, I can clarify it, but this is just talking about deliberation.
Okay, yeah, we can move on. We don't need to keep going on that one. I just, and by the way, when we send documents, we can do that, but we're not allowed to even offer an opinion on them or say, hey, I think this is
right.
You can only send the document, then say.
You can't reply back.
And you can't even in your email offer an opinion on the document.
Correct.
That's so. All right. Now this is one that I had asked about before. There's new language, and I know we changed the performance process. But again, this one it only seems to allow us to evaluate based on the handful of goals and not anything else. And then Colleen, you came back and said, well, but I have my contract. And but it seems to still say, okay, we set 6 or 8 goals with you agreeing, and that those are the only things we can evaluate the manager on. And it just seemed like it has us in such a tight little box there.
Which section are you under? Sorry.
Sorry, C. And if none of the other commissioners see that, then I'll stand down. I just seem like this.
Where is it?
It says the board will give the general manager a performance appraisal based on the general manager performance and satisfaction of goals and tasks agreed upon.
Okay. All right. Never mind. I didn't.
I've been here 8 years. You guys have done an evaluation on everything that I've done, so I'm not really sure.
Okay, never mind. Okay, fine. I just wanted to ask. So Yeah, so in F, yes, it's in section F, yes, it's true that a chair it's totally at the discretion of a chair whether to allow public comment, how much, not at all. So I don't think we need to add language because it just seems just sort of draconian, like I will cancel public comment, or, in the interest of time. It's like, yeah, of course you can do that, but why are we adding it? It seems to put an ominous flavor on what we do when I think the effort should be to allow public, we meet once a month. The meetings aren't that long.
But can I make a comment, please? In general, Dave, I agree with you completely. I think I am totally open to public comment. Prior to you being on the board, we had people coming in screaming and shouting and demanding that, who are we? I mean, who are these commissioners and what do they know about anything? And at some point you just got to stand up and say, I'm sorry, but you have to relieve the chair. You can no longer comment here. So I think having it as an explicit thing, it's a really good thing to do.
Yeah, you're quite right. We can limit and even prevent it. There's nothing stopping that. I just don't think we need language saying it, but.
Can I have to add that some of these things that I'm adding is because I have gotten so many comments over the years asking the same questions over and over and over again. So some of these are to clarify new commissioners that are coming in that don't understand. I don't want to point them to an open meeting law book. I just want to be able to put it in here so it's easy for the commissioners to come in and read this and know what they can do and what they can't do. It's certainly not written to try to limit.
Okay, that's a good, now that you say that, okay, that makes sense to me. So the only other thing I had was there was a place where it said that you will, and I know we've kind of fallen out of doing this, but that you will report to us quarterly on outside expenditures.
Right, that's what Erica just went over.
And it got changed to May if requested. I guess that's okay, but it seems like we're going away from requiring the reporting instead of just leaving the requirement in there and starting to enforce it.
Well, let me tell you the reason why I put in there. Requiring it or may ask me or direct me. We have had such a full agenda for the last year and a half. Sticking everything in there. This is exactly why at the end of the last meeting, I said I would put together a schedule that Erica, shared. It's intended to take policy 19 and every single thing, whether you're asking me or not, I'm going to do that on the quarterly basis in accordance with that calendar. So the word may is put in there more because I don't want to go a whole year and we just physically don't have enough time to do some of these things, or the chair takes it off the agenda and then I'm not in compliance. So if you look at the schedule we put together, everything's on there, and that's what we're committing to follow every month. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Well, it actually said may direct, yeah. So
I think that's all I had. Thank you for that, because some of these things I didn't understand. I don't think we actually did discuss this, like have this discussion before. So it is the policies governing how we do our thing. So thank you for tolerating the 10 minutes here, whatever it's been.
Can we go back to F again, like what Dave was mentioning?
sure.
Can we add the word after the first sentence? We add, the chair expects all comments to be respectful and appropriate. Can we add that as a second sentence?
Can you repeat that one more time?
The chair expects all comments to be respectful and appropriate. I think that kind of softens it a little bit.
Okay.
And says, if it's not, then the chair can step in at that point.
Okay. So can we do like we did the last time with the policy? If I make these changes, we can vote on it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And
All right.
next month, because updating the policies for legal and whatever are every month. So I will circulate the table for September, right? Because August, we're just going to look at rates and then we'll get to the next one.
Okay. You want a motion, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Phil.
Okay. Move that the Board of Commissioners approve policy 19, Board of Commissioners, as edited and presented on the recommendation of the general manager.
Second.
Let's please vote.
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Mr. Stempak, aye.
Mr. Talbot, aye.
Mr. Coulter, aye.
Rita, I.
All right. Passing 5-0. Excellent. We got through something. All right. Good job. Good job, everybody. All right.
Leadership, Bob. It's your leadership.
Excellent. Hey, listen.
Nice work.
I'm not a yeller. I'm a pacifist. So okay. All right. Let's go to item number 8. Procurement request requiring board approval, please. Mr.
Okay.
John McDonough.
Yes, good evening,
I move the
everyone.
motion.
How are you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I move the motion. Move the proposal IFP 2021-15 for one, parents number one, closed parent, materials handler truck with trade-in be awarded to James A. Kiley Company for $284,049 pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 164, Paragraph 56D on the recommendation of General Manager.
Second.
Okay.
Let's have a vote, please.
We get an explanation?
Was
Yeah.
there discussion at all?
Any discussion?
Absolutely. I can give some stuff on this for you guys. I know we're up against the clock here and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Just to give a high level overview of the proposal, this proposal for this vehicle, this material handler bucket, was sent out to 18 companies. We received 3 responses, one from Alltech Industries, one from James Kiley, and one from Taylor and Lloyd. Of those 18 companies who received the proposal package, there was one online resource company that would align this type of bid with other nationwide vendors as they were registered to align with this and get automatically notified. The proposal was also advertised in the Middlesex Daily Times Chronicle that reaches approximately 11 local communities and RMLD website. The lowest bidder was in fact Alltech with a bid of $262,000. The only issue with that is they took many exceptions, and even more alarming was the delivery time of almost 2 years for that piece of equipment. The second lowest bidder was in fact James Kiley, who came in at $284,000. Took 3 minor exceptions, and their delivery time was 47 to 52 weeks, so right about a year on that one. I do want to discuss a little bit about the bid and the process that we followed in order to achieve this goal here. So RMLD follows our own electrification operating procedure, which does follow and aligns with Mass DOER's electrification guidelines. And some of the technical specs that we had built into this piece of equipment was for a separate pricing section for an electric PTO or power takeoff. I'll just be referring to that as an ePTO going forward. Once we got all the proposals in hand and the responses that we received, obviously we analyzed them with our materials management and also our facilities to make sure all the proposed items were met and the technical specifications were there as well. And just a side note, as has been mentioned before in the past, when we send this bid packet out, we do have a form attached to this bid so that any vendor who receives it, where we ask them to fill it out if they're going to be a non-bid, if they're not going to participate in it, just so we can better understand who is more suited and who we should be expecting bids from. So we do send that out. Most companies don't actually return that. We do ask them to, but most don't. So in the case that we don't get a response, we'll follow up with a phone call asking why or what prevented them from participating in this bid. And RMLD also revised its fleet modification electrification assessment form to identify some of the best available options in electrification technology. So, going forward, this form gets filled out before, we get a tech spec written and put on the street. Going forward, that's how it's going to be. This last time we actually filled it out thereafter. So what we were looking to do here is we were looking for some technology on some of these larger heavy duty trucks that we could get electrification in them. And one of the options is an ePTO. And the ePTO system, does have some interesting benefits, such as reduced emissions, reduced noise, improved fuel efficiency. The only downside to it really is its upfront cost. It's, that was an upgrade kit of $83,000 for that, just for that one item. This system that they spec'd out is the newest generation of the ePTO, what they refer to as Gen 3. It's new to the market. It's new to the utility world. Again, one of the issues with this thing here, since it's brand new, we don't have a whole lot of available data to go along with it. We had asked the manufacturer, James Kiley, what type of orders have they received for the Generation 3 ePTO? And as of a month ago, they didn't have any orders. No one has ordered it, and there are no pending orders either. It does generate a significant discussion amongst the utility companies, but there are no municipal light plants in our area that have ordered one or that own a Generation 3. It is still a sizable unit. It weighs about 500 pounds. It's expensive to maintain. The average life for an RMLD asset like this is about 10 years. The problem with a Generation 3 is that its batteries don't have a 10-year lifespan. They typically have like a 6 or 7-year lifespan. So we'd have to replace the batteries in that ePTO before the lifespan of the truck was up. So we had a few concerns going forward with it. We also looked into some type of state grant that would help us afford this type of system. Unfortunately, the state does not offer any type of grant or program that would fit this category. Those grants and programs are designed for drivetrain electrification, not an accessory to the truck. But we do keep an eye on that to make sure that if and when they do become available, we can take advantage of that. And secondly, we're always keeping an eye on the technology to see how it's going to advance in the future. So the next vehicle we go looking at, obviously we're looking for electrification on this one. Finally, the recommendation is given the initial cost of the ePTO, about $83,000, and the cost recovery, we'd not be able to recover. I think on a fuel savings estimate, probably talking $36,000 over the lifespan of the truck. So we'd never get that. And then we have, the unavailability of supporting data, and then the reliability and maintenance of this new technology and the added weight. We decided it wasn't time. It wasn't time for this, but we will continue to evaluate cost and carbon savings as electrification technology advances. And that holds true for all RMLD fleet vehicles moving forward. That's what we'll be doing with those, and keeping an eye on the ePTO technology as well.
Can I add to that real quick, Bob?
Yes, please.
John didn't mention it, and I know he described it well, but so this is really that it's operating on a battery when it's in place at a job description and it's idling. That's what the ePTO does. I do want to mention though that, forever, we've done cost analysis. And I know that now with, as technology comes forward, it might not be, okay, there's a return on investment for 5 to 7 years. How do you calculate that for green going forward? So in this particular issue, we took a look at carbon in a weight in pounds. What is it traded at in the European market? So if you take a gallon of gas and what that equates into a pound of carbon, is that a way that we can justify this instead of just the old fashioned engineering economics, which is like 5 to 7 years? We also looked at the amount of carbon that we save during peak shredding and to see if we could make it equate that way. So we will continue to develop formulas for whether or not something that gets added in the future is going to be worthwhile. And we'll try to be very creative in trying to explain that, because I do understand that, you know, people want these things and they don't put as much effort, or not effort, but value into the old fashioned cost savings. So just so you know how we're going to be handling this going forward, because I think there's going to be a lot of technology that's going to come out. It's going to be really nice and it's going to save a lot of emissions, but it's going to cost a lot of money. And we're going to have to kind of agree on how we're going to do that calculation. So I just gave you a couple that we did on this last one. Thank you.
Any input from the commissioners? Okay, I couple quick questions. What's the lift impact versus hydraulic? Is there any change? Now we're running the system with an electric system versus a gas powered. Now, is there any lift impact because of that?
No,
Okay.
there's not. We actually had Kylie come in and demonstrate this for us so we could see it firsthand. And
Okay.
the physical operation of the truck does not change.
And then secondly, is there a temperature profile on that to keep the batteries heated in order to keep it stable and to keep it operational at cold temps or hot temps?
Yeah, it does have a heater inside of its enclosure, because obviously the characteristics of that battery will change in temperatures, more so cold than heat.
Okay. I'm sure you guys did an absolute due diligence on it. It's just, you know, the one thing that you don't want to see is it not have the oomph and cold temps that you need to have, right?
Yeah, it's a slick unit. It's really nice. It's really nice, but there's just too many unknowns with it.
Okay. All right.
Go.
So if no further questions, put to a vote.
Okay, Ms. Pacino, aye?
Albert, aye.
Rita, aye.
Mr. Coulter, aye. John, can't hear you. I can't see you, but I can't hear you.
John's on mute.
He's on
Sorry,
mute.
Mr. Stempak, aye.
Excellent. Okay, we pass 5-0. Okay, on to scheduling. What's the next date, Erica?
So right now we are looking for the August meeting on August 12th, and we will just be focusing on rates and approving some meeting minutes. I believe, I'm not positive, but this meeting will be a combined cab and board meeting.
What time? You want to do a 6:30 start, or we want to do a 7:30 start?
6:30.
Just as a
Anybody have
reminder,
any-
in accordance with the 20-year agreement, the cab will gets up to 30 days to review the rates when they're presented. So we're just trying to combine the presentation.
The 12th is fine with me. I have no problem with the 12th. Unless I get stuck in San Diego.
The 12th work for everyone else?
Yeah, I'd prefer it to be a little bit earlier in the week, like on a Tuesday, but I can try to make it work on the 12th.
I think the cab actually had an alternative date they suggested too, didn't they? I believe they suggested the 9th.
Yep, they were looking at the 9th as well. If we
So the
could.
9th,
As a backup date.
9th is a Monday.
Yeah,
let's see, the 9th. August 9th?
Yep.
August 9th.
Yeah, that's fine for me.
I think George said he was only Hooper, but we don't have to do a combined, but
Yeah, I can do the I can't do the Monday. I can do the Tuesday. I can do the 10th. But I can't do the 9th.
I can do the 10th.
Any day that week is fine with me.
I don't know if scheduling on our end works on the 10th. So it's either. So
why don't we send out you want to send out a
Yeah.
doodle poll?
I'll send out a doodle poll, put
Yeah.
a couple of dates in there, and then we can make a decision.
Okay, great. All right, and the next cab meeting coverage, August, Mr. Talbot?
Sure.
You're getting, it's dual, so.
I feel honored that you've selected me for this. This is
All right, and then September's Phil, and then October is John.
I think John is September, didn't we swap?
That's
John
right. I
and
think
John?
I switched with you, didn't I, Phil?
Yeah, because I took tonight. So
Yeah.
John will get September.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll switch.
And then October would be Marlena or myself?
I can do it.
Okay,
If it's online, I probably will attend it anyway, to be quite truthful. So gives you a preview of everything.
okay. All right.
Mm.
Okay, item 10, executive session. Phil,
Ready for the motion?
yes, please.
Move that the Board of Commissioners go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 164, Section 47D, exemption from public records and open meeting requirements in certain instances to discuss competitively sensitive issues regarding union negotiations and to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, and to return to regular session for the sole purpose of adjournment.
Second.
All right,
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Mr. Stimpek, aye.
Rita, I.
Mr. Coulter, aye. All right, it's adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Phil,
Thanks, John, Wendy.
all right, yes,
Thank you
thank
all.
you very much, everybody.
Thank you, John and Wendy and
And then,
Greg.
Thank you. Good night.